The Sejm of the Republic of Poland is the lower house of the Polish parliament. It consists of 460 deputies elected by universal ballot and is presided over by a speaker called the Marshal of the Sejm of the Republic of Poland. In the Kingdom of Poland, Sejm referred to the entire three-chamber Parliament of Poland, comprising the lower house, the upper house and the king. It was thus a three-estate parliament. Since the Second Polish Republic, Sejm has referred only to the lower house of the parliament. The upper house is called the Senat Rzeczypospolitej Polskiej. History = Kingdom of Poland = Sejm stems from an Old Slavic word meaning gathering. Its origin was the king's councils, which gained power during the time of Poland's fragmentation. The 1182 Sejm in Angstrom unregistered trademark Zikl was the most notable of these councils, in that for the first time in Poland's history it established laws constraining the power of the ruler. It forbade arbitrary sequestration of supplies in the countryside and takeover of bishopric lands after the death of a bishop. These early Sejms were not a regular event, they convened at the king's behest. After the 1493 Sejm in Iotk it became a regularly convening body, to which indirect elections were held every 2 years. The bicameral system was also established there. The Sejm now comprised 2 chambers, the Senate of 81 bishops and other dignitaries, and the Chamber of Envoys, made up of 54 envoys elected by smaller local Sejmik in each of the kingdom's provinces. At the time, Poland's nobility, which accounted for around 10% of the state's population, was becoming particularly influential, and with the eventual development of the Golden Liberty, the Sejm's powers increased dramatically. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth =. Over time, the number of envoys in the lower chamber grew in number and power as they pressed the king for more privileges. The Sejm eventually became even more active in supporting the goals of the privileged classes when the king ordered that the landed nobility and their estates be drafted into military service. After the Union of Lublin in 1569, the Kingdom of Poland became, through personal union with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and thus the Sejm was supplemented with new envoys from among the Lithuanian nobility. This commonwealth of both nations ensured that the state of affairs surrounding the three estates system continued, with the Sejm, Senate and King forming the estates and supreme deliberating body of the state. In the first few decades of the 16th century, the Senate had established its precedence over the Sejm. However, from the mid-1500s onwards, the Sejm became a very powerful representative body of the Szlachta. Soon, the Sejm began to limit the king's powers severely. Its chambers reserved the final decisions in legislation, taxation, budget, and treasury matters, foreign policy, and the conferment of nobility. The 1573 Warsaw Confederation saw the nobles of the Sejm officially sanction and guarantee religious tolerance in Commonwealth territory, ensuring a refuge for those fleeing the ongoing Reformation and counter-Reformation wars in Europe. Until the end of the 16th century, unanimity was not required, and the majority voting process was the most commonly used system for voting. Later, with the rise of the Polish magnates and their increasing power, the unanimity principle was reintroduced with the institution of the nobility's right of liberum veto. Additionally, if the envoys were unable to reach a unanimous decision within 6 weeks, deliberations were declared void and all previous acts passed by the Sejm were annulled. From the mid-17th century onward, any objection to a Sejm resolution, by either an envoy or a senator, automatically caused the rejection of other, previously approved resolutions. This was because all resolutions passed by a given session of the Sejm formed a whole resolution, and, as such, was published as the annual constituent act of the Sejm, for example the Anno Domini 1667 Act. In the 16th century, no single person or small group dared to hold up proceedings, but, from the second half of the 17th century, the liberum veto was used to virtually paralyze the Sejm, and brought the Commonwealth to the brink of collapse. The liberum veto was finally abolished with the adoption of Poland's May 3 Constitution in 1791. A piece of legislation which was passed as the Government Act, and for which the Sejm required 4 years to propagate and adopt. The Constitution's acceptance, and the possible long-term consequences it may have had, is arguably the reason for which the powers of Austria-Hungary, Russia and Prussia then decided to partition the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, thus putting an end to over 300 years of Polish parliamentary continuity. It is estimated that between 1493 and 1793, a Sejm was held 240 times, the total debate time sum of which was 44 years. Partitions after the fall of the Duchy of Warsaw, which existed as a Napoleonic client state between 1807 and 1815, and its short-lived Sejm of the Duchy of Warsaw, the Sejm of Congress Poland was established in the Kongresy Cube WKA of Russia. It was composed of the king, the upper house, and the lower house. Overall, during the period from 1795 until the re-establishment of Poland's sovereignty in 1918, little power was actually held by any Polish legislative body, and the occupying powers of Russia, Prussia and Austria-Hungary propagated legislation for their own respective formerly Polish territories at a national level. Congress Poland. The Chamber of Envoys, despite its name, consisted not only of 77 envoys from the hereditary nobility, but also of 51 deputies, elected by the non-noble population. All deputies were covered by parliamentary immunity, with each individual serving for a term of office of 6 years, with half of the deputies being elected every 2 years. Candidates for deputy had to be able to read and write, and have a certain amount of wealth. The legal voting age was 21, except for those citizens serving in the military, the personnel of which were not allowed to vote. Parliamentary sessions were initially convened every 2 years, and lasted for 30 days. However, after many clashes between Liberal deputies and Conservative government officials, sessions were later called only 4 times. The Sejm had the right to call for votes on civil and administrative legal issues, and, with permission from the king, it could also vote on matters related to the fiscal policy and the military. It had the right to exercise control over government officials, and to file petitions. The 64-member Senate, on the other hand, was composed of voivodes and castellans, Russian princes of their blood, and 9 bishops. It acted as the parliamentary court, had the right to control citizens' books, and had similar legislative rights as did the Chamber of Deputies. Germany and Austria-Hungary. In the Free City of Krakow, a unicameral Assembly of Representatives was established, and from 1827, a unicameral provincial Sejm existed in the Grand Duchy of Potsdam. Poles were elected to and represented the majority in both of these legislatures. However, they were largely powerless institutions and exercised only very limited power. After numerous failures in securing legislative sovereignty in the early 19th century, many Poles simply gave up trying to attain a degree of independence from their foreign master states. In the Austrian partition, a relatively powerless Sejm of the Estates operated until the time of the Spring of Nations. After this, in the mid to late 19th century, only in autonomous Galicia was there a unicameral and functional national Sejm, the Sejm of the land. It is recognized today as having played a major and overwhelming positive role in the development of Polish national institutions. In the second half of the 19th century, Poles were able to become members of the parliaments of Austria, Prussia and Russia, where they formed Polish clubs. Deputies of Polish nationality were elected to the Prussian Landtag from 1848, and then to the German Empire's Reichstag from 1871. Polish deputies were members of the Austrian State Council, and from 1906 were also elected to the Russian Imperial State Duma and to the State Council. Second Republic. After the First World War and re-establishment of Polish independence, the convocation of Parliament, under the democratic electoral law of 1918, became an enduring symbol of the new state's wish to demonstrate and establish continuity with the 300-year Polish parliamentary traditions established before the time of the partitions. Marshal emphatically paid tribute to this with the phrase, "There is Poland there, and so is the Sejm." During the interwar period of Poland's independence, the first legislative Sejm of 1919, a constituent assembly, passed the small Constitution of 1919, which introduced a parliamentary republic and proclaimed the principle of the Sejm's sovereignty. This was then strengthened, in 1921, by the March Constitution, one of the most democratic European constitutions enacted after the end of World War I. The constitution established a political system which was based on Montesquieu's doctrine of separation of powers, and which restored the bicameral Sejm consisting of a lower house and an upper house, the Senate. In 1919, Rosa Pomerantz-Meltzer, a member of the Zionist Party, became the first woman ever elected to the Sejm. The legal content of the March Constitution allowed for Sejm supremacy in the system of state institutions at the expense of the executive powers, thus creating a parliamentary republic out of the Polish state. An attempt to strengthen executive powers in 1926 proved too limited and largely failed in helping avoid legislative gridlock which had ensued as a result of too great parliamentary power in a state which had numerous diametrically opposed political parties sitting in its legislature. In 1935, the parliamentary republic was weakened further when, by way of Jakub's Piasecki's coup, the president was forced to sign the April Constitution of 1935, an act through which the head of state assumed the dominant position in legislating for the state and the Senate increased its power at the expense of the Sejm. On September 2, 1939, the Sejm held its final pre-war session, during which it declared Poland's readiness to defend itself against invading German forces. On November 2, 1939, the president dissolved the Sejm and the Senate, which were then, according to plan, to resume their activity within 2 months after the end of the Second World War. This, however, never happened. During wartime, the National Council was established to represent the legislature as part of the Polish government in exile. Meanwhile, in Nazi-occupied Poland, the Council of National Unity was set up. This body functioned from 1944 to 1945 as the Parliament of the Polish underground state. With the cessation of hostilities in 1945, and subsequent rise to power of the communist-backed Provisional Government of National Unity, the Second Polish Republic legally ceased to exist. Polish People's Republic The Sejm in the Polish People's Republic had 460 deputies throughout most of its history. At first, this number was declared to represent 1 deputy per 60,000 citizens, but, in 1960, as the population grew, the declaration was changed. The constitution then stated that the deputies were representative of the people and could be recalled by the people, but this article was never used, and, instead of the 5-point electoral law, a non-proportional, 4-point version was used. Legislation was passed with majority voting. The Sejm voted on the budget as well as on the periodic national plans that were a fixture of communist economies. The Sejm deliberated in sessions that were ordered to convene by the State Council. The Sejm also chose a presidium from among its members, the Marshal of which was always a member of the United People's Party. In its preliminary session, the Sejm also nominated the Prime Minister, the Council of Ministers of Poland, and members of the State Council. It also chose many other government officials, including the head of the Supreme Chamber of Control and members of the State Tribunal and the Constitutional Tribunal, as well as the Ombudsman. The Senate of Poland was abolished by the Polish People's Referendum in 1946, after which the Sejm became the sole legislative body in Poland. Even though the Sejm was largely subservient to the Communist Party, it is worth noting that a single brave deputy, Romuald Bukowski, voted against the imposition of martial law in 1982. Today After the end of communism in 1989, the Senate was reinstated as the upper house of a bicameral National Assembly, while the Sejm became the lower house. The Sejm is now composed of 460 deputies elected by proportional representation every 4 years. Between 7 and 19 deputies are elected from each constituency using the D'Hondt method, their number being proportional to their constituency's population. Additionally, a threshold is used, so that candidates are chosen only from parties that gained at least 5% of the nationwide vote. Standing committees. Most recent election, notes. See also, electoral districts of Poland. Types of Sejm Confederated Sejm, Convocation Sejm, Coronation Sejm, Election Sejm, National Assembly of the Republic of Poland, Sejmik, the Województwo Sejmik. equals famous Sejms equals, silent Sejm, convocation Sejm, Repnin Sejm, partition Sejm, Great Sejm, Grodno Sejm, Silesian Sejm, contract Sejm. References, ABPSE Sejusik Zawidzini PSM. Jan Klawita Pozesto Edian Impzedsta Wislam PRZWSEJMIE Nipzita Pia du Klubu PIS. http orca.sejm.gov $file stand %20 na %20 xi %c 5% 84% 2016% 20 list opada % 200 2015% 20 pdf, Potsat Sejm. Sejm. Retrieved June 16, 2013. ABCDEFG Potsat Sejm. op.sejm.gov.pl. Retrieved June 16, 2013. Davis, Norman. God's Playground, A History of Poland. Columbia University Press. Pages 302. Strauss, Herbert Arthur. Hostages of Modernization, Studies on Modern Antisemitism, 1870–1933/39. Walter de Guita. Pages 985. http www.nytimes.com 10 Obituaries Romuald Bukowski Polished Legislators 64 html, Komunikat por Florence Komisji Wyborczej Dnia 26 Października 2015 Związek Wynikacza Głosowania na listy kandydata Cube W na pozycję Cube WW Skali Kraju pkw.gov.pl. October 26, 2015. Retrieved October 27, 2015. External links, official website, description of the modern Sejm's role in the Polish political system, CNN Election Watch.